Hi, I'm Kent. With my new plaster molds, I've been slip casting more pots. My shelves behind me are starting to get a little bit full. However, with more pots, that means I've also been using my slip, and I'm just about out. My order for more clay hasn't come in at the pottery store yet, so let's go ahead and reclaim some of my dry trimmings. When I slip cast my pots, there wind up being a fair number of trimmings. Some of them are off the top rim of the pot. I slip cast the pots a little bit tall so I can trim them so that as the slip gets absorbed, I don't wind up with a different thickness at the top. And occasionally I'll have a failed pot. The other excess clay I have when slip casting is when I dump out the pot. So for potters that do a lot of slip casting, they have a slip table and they will just turn the mold upside down over the slip table and let it drain out. I don't have one of those. I've tried a bunch of different ways to capture the excess slip as it runs out, sometimes running straight into the bucket, other times just running onto my bench. If I do let it run out onto my bench, then I do let it dry and put it in with my trimmings as well. So I keep my slip in these 5-gallon buckets, and here is the last of my remaining slip. There's a little bit left in here, and I can maybe do 1 or 2 more pots, but not many. And eventually all my trimmings wind up in this bucket. So here you can see the bottom of some test tiles I've trimmed off. I've got a really big one here that is a failed pot that wound up being way too thick. Most of it winds up being tops of pots that I've trimmed off. I try and keep these trimmings relatively clean. As I trim a pot, I'll just throw it directly into this bucket. Or if it winds up dripping out onto my bench, I want to make sure my bench is clean so I don't contaminate it with glazes or other things as well. So I do a pretty good job keeping it free of contaminants, although there is possibilities that a few things will slip in. For my colored slips, I actually have a separate container. So I've been playing around with adding different things to my slip, and I've kept all that separately. And I have some from my test tiles as well that have varying amounts of things that are mixed in. So all of these that have had additions, I'm keeping separate from my regular trimmings. This I can treat basically as my regular clay once I've recycled it. These will wind up colored in different ways. Winds up with an interesting effect, but it's always a little bit random. So how do we turn these dry trimmings into slip? Well, the answer is basically just to add water. All these trimmings were once slip, so they have had water in them and defloculant as well. Off camera, I weighed this, so I know how much dry clay is in here. It's basically 7 kilograms, which is convenient because my slip I mix up to be 30% water by dry weight. So I'll wind up with 10 kilograms of slip, 70% will be this clay, and I need to add 30%. Once I add the water, I'm going to let it sit for a while and soak in. These pieces are relatively big, so it'll take a while for all the clay to hydrate. One of the nice things about the clay I've been getting from the pottery store recently is it comes in a powdered form and it really sucks up the water very, very quickly. This will take a little bit longer. I could probably break all these pieces up so that it would suck in the water faster, but I don't want to create all the dust. There should still be some defloculant left in this clay, and as the water gets added, it should do its magic and make the clay more fluid. However, I'm going to check the consistency, test it out, and see how it looks. So with that, let me go ahead and measure out some water and we'll add it in. One thing I should mention is that all of these trimmings are now bone dry. They've been sitting for a good while and it's been warm here, so all the water's evaporated. You can add water to wet clay. The problem is you don't know exactly how much water's in there. That means the resulting slip, you don't actually know the water content as well. But going all the way to bone dry, there isn't any residual water in the clay or not very much. That means that the water you add can get you to the exact target you want for the slip consistency. So 7 kilograms of clay, which means I need 3 kilograms of water. That happens to be 3 liters, which is very convenient. So I just measured out 3 liters in this tub here, and I'm going to add it in. If you listen, you can hear the hissing of the clay absorbing the water. So there is water in the bottom here, but there's not very much. It's a deceptively little amount of water. It's been a couple hours and I used my dowel to push down the clay just a little bit. You can see it's now below the water surface. There's still a bunch of hard pieces in here though. So I'm going to spend a minute and break up these chunks and then we'll come back to it. I I'm guessing I could just let this sit for even longer, but I am slightly impatient, so I figure a little bit of mechanical persuasion will help things along. So it's been another hour or so, and I think there's still a bunch of chunks in here, but I'm going to use my paddle attachment and mix it up. All right, so the top's looking pretty good. It's looking like slip, but if you tilt it, there definitely are a bunch of chunks still on the bottom, so it needs to sit and hydrate some more. It is later in the day, and this is now looking a lot like slip. All right, this is feeling pretty good. It's very fluid like slip, so I think the defloculant that was in the dried clay is doing its job. I haven't added any more. There may be some little chunks of clay left in here still, and there might be other things that fell in during the reclaiming process. So I'm going to run this through a sieve to make sure everything's good to go. So I got a mesh sieve here. I'm going to fish out slip from my reclaim bucket and put it in with my virgin clay. All right, this is running through just great. And you see that I am catching a handful of things in the bottom here. All right, I think that's just about all of it. There's a little bit in here, but I think this is going to be the start of the next batch of trimmings. So it means I can take all of this chunks here and put them back in. All right, done with the trimmings bucket, so I can go ahead and give my new slip a good mix. And let's go ahead and slip cast a pot for fun. All right, that's excellent. Hopefully that will get me through for a little bit longer until my new clay comes in. So that's my process for taking my trimmings that have been all dried out. I go ahead and rehydrate them. I mix them up, stir them in. This time I didn't have to add any more defloculant. What was in the trimmings was enough. If this was a little bit too stiff, instead of adding water, I would add some more defloculant. I ran it through a strainer just to make sure I don't have any lumps of clay left in or any other particles that managed to get into my clay. Give it a good mix up again, and it's just like new clay. It's not technically just like new clay. I think if you keep reusing your clay over and over again, eventually some of the properties do change. This is my first time recycling this clay, and I mixed it in with the other clay, so I'm not worried about that at all. If you're really curious, it has something to do with the size of the platelets of clay in the slip. If you have any questions or comments about this or anything else, please let me know. Thanks.